You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, Episode 577, Unimatrix Zero, Part II.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we go once more into the matrix of Star Trek episodes and do a deep dive into the morals, meanings, and messages, seeing if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Unimatrix Zero Part II, the one where Janeway and the Borg Queen have a bluffing contest, while Seven figures out that love can be a challenge, whether it's in the real world or the virtual. Also, a bluffing contest.
It really is. Yeah. So true. I will be back momentarily with trivia. But first, Norman is going to tell all of you where to reach us.
We'd love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. And while you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now here's John Champion, bluffing or not bluffing, about this week's trivia.
Well, it's no bluff, but I do have to say this is one of those interesting places where Unimatrix Zero Part I, Unimatrix Zero Part II, pretty close to each other, so there's not a lot of new trivia to share. We have a story here by Mike Sussman, Brandon Braga, and Joe Menosky. No surprise, since Part 1 was based on a pitch brought in by Mike, and as it evolved into a two-parter and a season-ending cliffhanger, no less, Brandon and Joe took on some more work to shape up its conclusion. Therefore, we have a teleplay by Brandon Braga and Joe Menosky. Not a surprise there, since they had scripted Part 1. Now, we have a director in the seat, though, who we know, Mike Vehard. Remember, Mike did not direct Part 1. That was Alan Croker. But if you go back to our most recent discussions of Mike's work on Voyager, of course, he has had a long run with the franchise, but most recently we discussed his episode Muse. You know, we are pulling in for our final season of Voyager here, just to put things in perspective on the calendar. Part 1 of Unimatrix Zero aired in May of 2000. Principal photography in Part 2 began at the end of June, so pretty close between the time it aired to the time that they started production on this second final episode of that two-episode arc. The premiere date for this, remember they shot it starting the end of June, premiere date was October 4th of 2000. Now, let's talk about our guest stars, and naturally, since this is the conclusion of a two-parter, we have a lot of returning guests. In fact, we have all returning guests. Susanna Thompson is back for her final of 3 episodes as the Borg Queen, and so far this is her final Trek appearance in the entire franchise. 3 of our Unimatrix Zero regulars are back. There's Joanna Heimbold as Laura, Jerome Butler as Karak, and of course Mark Deakins as Axum. Likewise, for all 3, these are the last credits they have to date in a Star Trek project.
Welcome to the collective. You got assimilated and all you got was this lousy t-shirt, and something stuck in your brain.
Last time on Voyager, Janeway and crew made the decision to liberate the drones in Unimatrix Zero with a cunning plan. Get assimilated and, help from the inside. Prologue. Tuvok, B'Elanna, and Captain Janeway are deep inside Borg territory and deep inside a Borg cube. Thanks to the Doctor's quick work, an anti-assimilation inoculation is keeping their minds intact for now. Tuvok and B'Elanna manage to find each other and set off for the central plexus, but Janeway, she's been separated, and she's getting more Borg tech implanted into her skull. Act 1. Voyager sticks to the cube like glue, monitoring Janeway, Tuvok, and B'Elanna's brain activity, but there's no sign yet that the virus has been deployed. The cube's banged up, but still on track to be back online within a couple of hours. Chakotay sends 7 of 9 into Unimatrix Zero to check on progress, even though she's not exactly thrilled about the reunion with Axum after their awkward "it's not you, it's me, and we're both drones in a virtual dream" moment. Inside Unimatrix Zero, things aren't looking much better. The Borg are picking off individuals one by one while Karak prepares a defense. Axum's nowhere to be found, which rattles 7 even more, but Karak reminds her emotions are a liability here. Another drone arrives, but the bad news keeps coming. He doesn't remember where he came from, meaning the virus still hasn't started working. Meanwhile, on the cube, Tuvok and B'Elanna reach the central plexus, where they find Janeway already in position, but struggling to access the system without tipping off the hive. B'Elanna spots a backup plan just in time, because Tuvok's anti-assimilation treatment is starting to fail. And the Borg Queen, well, she's noticed something too. Her new Starfleet drones are suspiciously silent. Act 2. In Unimatrix Zero, Axum has been busy setting traps. Good news for their defenses, not so good for 7 when she accidentally trips one. When Axum frees her, 7 says Karak was worried. Yeah, totally, it was about Karak. She's ready to leave it at that, but Axum decides to come with her. Meanwhile, back on the cube, B'Elanna works on accessing the plexus while Tuvok battles his fading individuality by reciting personal facts about himself. B'Elanna manages to break through and uploads the virus, but Tuvok fully succumbs, identifying himself as 3 of 12. Through him, the Borg Queen learns exactly where the troublemakers are, but not before the virus goes live. Janeway and B'Elanna try to get away from 3 of 12 and the crowding Borg drones as Voyager moves in close to pull them out. But the central plexus is shielded, and the rescue attempts fail. Janeway is captured. Chakotay orders Harry to prep a phaser strike on the cube's shield generators, but it's too late. The Queen, now digging through Tuvok's memories, hacks Voyager's tactical systems. A torpedo slams into the ship, causing multiple hull breaches. Tom wants to press the attack, but Chakotay orders a retreat. Back in her chamber, the Queen realizes her problems are getting worse by the second. More drones are going silent. First a few, then 100, then thousands, even one right next to her. And he fights back. So now that Borg's new designation is dead. Act 3. Janeway, still linked to the hive, faces off against the Borg Queen as a holographic version of herself, looking like the captain we know, not a drone. The Queen taunts her, showing the body of a dead drone and blaming her. The virus is working, and the Queen raises the stakes by self-destructing Borg vessels with tens of thousands of drones on board. It will continue, unless Janeway convinces the infected drones to return to the collective. Janeway refuses, suggesting the Queen should visit Unimatrix Zero herself if she wants answers. On Voyager, repairs are underway. 7 confirms the virus has taken hold. The drones can remember being in Unimatrix Zero. So Chakotay orders her back in to find any allies aboard the cube. The Doctor tweaks her alcove for safety and nudges her about perhaps giving Axum a second chance when the war is over. In Unimatrix Zero, the infected drones debate their next move. Axum wants to strike the Unicomplex, but 7 insists that they also rescue Janeway, B'Elanna, and Tuvok. Karak isn't thrilled, but finally agrees. After the others leave, 7 and Axum share a quiet moment. He realizes that he's on a ship on the other side of the galaxy. That will make meeting in real life considerably more difficult. They kiss, agreeing that, for now, Unimatrix Zero will have to be enough. Act 4. In Unimatrix Zero, a child runs into a visitor, the Borg Queen. She sweet-talks the kid, spinning a fairy tale about how wonderful it is to be part of the collective. Endless friends, shared thoughts, no loneliness. The child leads her high up, giving her a full view of Unimatrix Zero and its inhabitants. Back in the real world, the Queen isn't so warm and charming. She informs Janeway that she's ready to release a mutated virus that will wipe out every drone linked to Unimatrix Zero unless Janeway convinces them to willingly return to the hive. Moments later, Janeway appears as a hologram in Voyager's sickbay, issuing a surprising order. Tell the drones that they must return to the collective because Unimatrix Zero can no longer exist. Seven and the Doctor are rattled, but Chakotay quickly pieces together the real meaning. Janeway's plan isn't to betray the freed drones, but to save them by removing the one thing the Queen can still use to hurt them. Right on cue, a transwarp conduit opens. A Borg sphere approaches, and this time, it's actually good news. Karak hails Tom, ready to join the fight. Act 5. Voyager and Karak sphere team up to attack the Borg cube, holding Janeway, B'Elanna, and Tuvok. Karak manages to breach the outer shields, but Voyager still can't lock onto their people. They keep hammering away, looking for any chance to break through. Meanwhile, in Unimatrix Zero, the end is coming fast. Axum oversees the final evacuation, staying behind until everyone else is gone. Seven finds him just in time for a bittersweet farewell. They promise to find each other someday, but they both know it's unlikely. They exit, and Unimatrix Zero burns away into memory. The Queen, furious, triggers the cube's self-destruct. Voyager seizes a split-second opportunity when the shields drop. Janeway, B'Elanna, and Tuvok are beamed out just before the cube blows up real good. Karak's ship escapes too, ready to fight another day. Later in sickbay, the Doctor works to de-assimilate the crew. Janeway and B'Elanna are recovering fast, while Tuvok needs a little more time. Seven drops by with good news. Karak has made contact with another resistant cell. Change may be slow, but it's finally coming for the Borg. The end.
Well done, John. Kind of mining those very difficult, sometimes alliterations with all of those different naming conventions.
Oof, so many.
Anti-assimilation inoculation at the very beginning of your recap. Sounds like a new Rage Against the Machine song.
I'm glad you called it, because when I wrote it, I was like, oh yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, for the purposes of this episode, we may, there's just a lot of name checking Unimatrix Zero. We may just call it the Unimatrix. We may just call it U0. We may just say, the place, the dream state. Bear with us. Yeah. We learned early on, not everybody gets a vocal subprocessor. Only B'Elanna, who I thought her voice carries anyway. I don't think she necessarily needs one, but she got it. Also, again, as you pointed out in the last episode, good thing that they're not getting ocular implants or total limb replacement.
Yeah, because there's that. And I have, an observation about that. I do like the establishing shot of the inner scale of the Borg tactical cube to show how vast it is, like every Borg tactical cube or every Borg cube.
Right, those things are huge.
So it's really good that Tuvok just stumbles upon B'Elanna.
Yeah.
Because that would put a kink in their plan. Speaking of kink in the plan.
Yeah.
When Janeway has the implant drilled into her head at the end of the prologue, I know that that's a nod to what happened with Picard's transformation as Locutus. I get that. But if we think about this realistically, it goes through her skull and into her brain.
Yep.
Just put a pin in that.
Yeah. Okay. Literally and figuratively. That's, yeah. All right. Now, there are so many things here that just don't necessarily make sense. And look, I understand after doing Mission Log for nearly 13 years and watching Star Trek for nearly 50 years, I understand that not everything has to add up or make perfect scientific sense. It's really about the story. It's about the characters. I get that. But there are things here. there are things like, okay, the Doctor is literally on the bridge watching their brain patterns inside a Borg cube. And I'm like, you guys just had to nope out of there. You just had to leave. How close are you that you're able to see the individual brain patterns of three people who have not been assimilated? That's right. No, come on. Yeah.
you're right. There are certain things that we just going to have to swallow.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
When it comes to suspension of disbelief, but if we don't, then we're not going to get through this. Because hey, look, there's Captain Janeway in the central plexus nexus.
Yeah.
That they stumble upon also as well. Like Tuvok doesn't know it's her. Tuvok's about to nerve pinch a drone to get past a certain point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess Tuvok is Vulcan for lucky.
Yeah, you're so right. And by the way, Plexus Nexus is my Alan Parsons tribute band. So
wait,
yeah.
So yeah, okay. So we'll have Plexus Nexus, and then that first single on Plexus Nexus is going to be Anti-Assimilation Inoculation.
Yep.
Right. We'll have Tom Morello do the guitar.
Oh yes, perfect. All
right.
There is a great line. I really like Karak. He's really good. And then this, when he pulls Seven aside, he's like, some advice from a warrior in the bedchamber as well as the battlefield. I'm like, I want this guy's full story. I want the novelization. I want the whole thing about Karak, because that is a great line.
I could not help but see a different actor in that part. Keith David or David Keith.
Oh,
I think,
yeah.
I keep getting that screwed up. It's Keith David.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's Keith David.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Ron Canada, because Ron Canada also is awesome in Klingon roles, or any role, really.
100%.
You're going to add this to the Plexus Nexus album. Okay. So neural suppressant, because now this is a thing.
Yeah.
Right. Does a neural suppressant also block physical pain, like a dagger-sized shard of metal getting drilled into your brain?
I have to think so. Yeah, I think that suppressant has got to be suppressing a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's no nasal suppressant, that's for sure.
Tuvok, I'm surprised that they went with Tuvok as the one who had all the problems with this, because I would think he needs to switch on those Vulcan mental powers that he's got. You know, he's the one who trained Kes. I mean, and he's an older guy. According to this episode, he's over 100 years old, 113. So I would think he would have gotten
a theory
good about
that.
Yeah? Okay. Maybe he's not that good.
I had a Well, no, I had a problem with that also. I'm like, why would Tuvok be the first, to be susceptible to this? And he's like, well, it's because he's the most strongest telepathic mind.
Okay.
So it's kind of like an antenna.
Right.
He's broadcasting telepathy in general.
Okay.
Right.
I buy that.
So he's kind of like a heat map for Tuvok's brain.
I buy that. All right. And I guess, according to the rules, and again, we're still trying to parse the rules inside Unimatrix Zero, you can take out a Borg drone with a tripwire and a heavy branch. Right. So again, just why not use any weapon you can imagine? You can imagine the holy hand grenade that takes out Borg.
Well, it's the it's the relic that Brother Maynard carries. Mm-hmm. So of course they should have a Brother Maynard in there as well.
They should. Yep.
Yeah. We've made and poked fun at kind of like the tropical setting of Unimatrix Zero. Yeah. And of course they have vines and things like that to make these really cool traps. But I do like the Predator vibe that was going on with the Borg drones and using their I-beam lasers as kind of like the triangular sighting technique that the Predators use. Also, I do love Ewok style traps.
I thought the same thing.
Right?
Yep.
And who doesn't love like an Ewok style net trap? Right. Because that's how Axum literally caught Seven in his trap.
Yeah. Literally and figuratively. Yeah.
Bluff or no bluff.
Yep. I know that we'll talk about this, but Chakotay's line, a first officer could get into a lot of trouble talking to his captain like that. And of course, the only way that Tom can respond logically is, I learned from the best, because that is the perfect line. I imagine you might have some thoughts on that.
I have a couple.
Okay.
I do. I have a couple. But first, so Tuvok says, Captain, if I succumb to the collective, I will pose a security risk.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is going to be an issue later on. I mean, what would happen if Tuvok, who knows all the codes for Voyager security, would be compromised?
Yeah.
Add that to the not ever happening risk assessment session that they had.
Yeah. Oh, man, you're right. Yeah. Again, you send in a guy like Baxter. He doesn't know the code, I'm guessing, but he could still take out all the Borg.
Oh, with his hands.
Easily.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I have a pedantic moment coming up here. Going to literally push up my glasses because at one point, Borg Janeway tells Borg B'Elanna to download the virus. Excuse me, don't you mean upload the virus?
Oh, you just actually...
I did.
This.
I just actually
yeah, you did.
This. Yep.
I'm going to actually this
okay.
also. Okay, so I'm glad that you brought this up because it does bring up a concern of mine. So B'Elanna should upload, not downloads the virus, but uploads the virus into the central plexus module.
Yep.
Okay, so, and I brought this up in Unimatrix Zero Part I. If the nanovirus is biologically inside B'Elanna's bloodstream so she can use the tubules to upload the virus.
Right. Yeah.
So she injected herself with the nanovirus.
Yeah.
Because then she gets assimilated.
Right. Oh.
And then she has tubules to upload the virus.
Right.
So that's all part of the risk assessment plan.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So as a nanovirus, which is a physical virus that's being injected, i.e. uploaded into the central plexus node, then how does that infect the rest of the Borg collective when they're not connected
physically
to an isolated ship?
Yeah. I think we might have to just stop and contemplate that. So many questions about the virus because there's a lot of versions of viri going on in this episode.
Viri?
Yeah.
Is that a word?
It is. That's plural for virus.
That's the second cut on the album. On Plexus Nexus.
That is. Tuvok name checks a city on Vulcan, T'Pol, which I thought was cool. Paal, which is kind of cool. And that's also where we get a little more detail about his history.
I love it when Harry says, someone's accessing our tactical controls. Our shields are down. Really?
Big surprise there. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I like this showdown between the Borg Queen and Janeway. We'll talk more about it in the next segment, I think. I have to wonder, though, just from a production standpoint, do you make this concession and you have Holo Janeway show up in her normal look, her normal Starfleet uniform? Because in that way you give the makeup crew a bit of a break, that they don't have to do Kate in the Borg gear for those scenes.
First of all, I love it when you said Holo Janeway because Holo Janeway was our Janeway on Star Trek Prodigy.
Oh, of course. Yeah, there we go.
So I love hearing Holo Janeway again.
Yeah.
No, I get what you're saying, and I think it's probably that reason so that Kate isn't in makeup all the time.
Just break up the production a bit. Okay, we only need you 2 days in Borg gear instead of 3. Yeah,
I'm sure it's uncomfortable, especially the implant in her brain.
Sure not the best. Yeah.
So the Queen says to Janeway, I know how this must upset you, Captain. As a Starfleet officer, you value all life, even drones. But does she?
Yeah.
It's not like she's valued the drones of the past.
Yeah.
So unless the Queen knows something that we don't know.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I do like the tete-a-tete, of course, and the constant one-upping, the bluffing, the little game of chicken that they're playing here. Because the Queen, according to Janeway, could go into Unimatrix Zero. At this point in the show, she has not. If she wanted to, maybe. And that, again, indicates that the Queen knows where it is, knows how to get there, probably did all along. Cutting back to Voyager, really nice momentum. This is a great scene. When you come back to the bridge, Seven shows up with the report, what's going on. Orders are given, statuses are given, and the camera is just moving throughout the whole sequence until she gets back on the turbolift to go back down. Super well directed. I just love that moment.
I mean, we have mentioned this in the past, but Jerry's also really strong in a lot of nuance and subtlety.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of her acting sometimes can be it's so remarkable with just that. Yeah, always a wonderful performance from her. So the doctor can see the Seven's pupils dilate in her alcove. Yeah. But he still was slighted by Neelix's, he was taken advantage of by Neelix's sleight of hand to the shell game earlier on.
Yeah, I know.
I won't let that go. I won't let it go.
I do like it's an interesting bit, though, to have the doctor kind of counsel her about her romantic relationship with Axum. And did you notice that there's even this like little bit, almost a smile before she starts regeneration? Just the tiniest bit, and it's great. And I guess once we get in there, hey, the doctor's encouragement worked.
Yeah. It was nice. I mean, obviously, those two, I should say Robert and Jerry, are great together. Yeah. I think they just have great chemistry together for those scenes. Axum says, it's a matter of honor, Karak. I thought you of all people would understand that this is Axum trying to get everyone together to go also rescue the away team. Even in the Delta Quadrant, even in Unimatrix Zero, they still throw honor back in the faces of Klingons.
As they should. Yes.
I was just like, wow. Yeah. It's just not a Deep Space Nine problem.
Yeah. Really like the scene with the kid and the Borg Queen, and the Borg Queen's words are so chilling. Assimilation turns us all into friends. Yes, it's fun. I mean, that has, again, that creepy cult vibe to the Borg sales pitch.
When she says that, she also says, like, I was just about your age when I was assimilated. So when the Queen was a drone to start, right? And then she's elevated to Queen to lead the Borg. Is that how it happens?
Yeah, I mean, I still go with the theory that you probably have multiple Queens. By the way, I think this is something that Star Trek could have and should have addressed by now. But I think you can have multiple Queens depending on need. There's a certain part of the program that elevates itself, grabs whatever the biological unit is that's needed, and says, you know what, we could really use a Queen over here. We need another kind of, sort of lead node on this particular collective. So, yeah, I think there's something to explore there, but they didn't.
Are you saying that we need a Borg chart? For leadership?
Yes, I am, Norman.
I was wondering what the Borg chart looked like on a hive. So I did say this in Unimatrix Zero Part 1 for mission log, and you've also brought this up. If the Queen knows where to send her drones, she literally knows where Unimatrix Zero is. And now in this scene where she's standing next to the child again, I mean, how many times do we have to see her knowing where it is, but her not knowing where it is?
Yeah, well, see, there you go.
Right.
Yeah. All right, and I hate to get so bogged down in this whole virus thing, so we're gonna fight the virus with a virus, because that's the Queen's plan, and the Queen is going to return maybe to Unimatrix Zero in person or on a computer terminal, I don't know, and release it herself. How exactly? Because we don't know if this is a physical thing or a virtual thing. It is a virtual world, after all, inhabited by people from the physical world. And I just kept thinking, again, can't they just wait for her to show up and bash her with a tree? Because apparently that works.
Ewok
traps. That's what we need.
If anyone's going to take, anyone's going to take away anything from this show,
Ewok traps.
Ewok traps. If Unimatrix Zero drones are virtual avatars of their unconscious Borg physical bodies, that was established, in the first episode.
Yeah.
And if they are disconnected from the hive mind, then how will the Queen's modified nanovirus infect a disconnected virtual avatar?
See, you're asking even better questions than I am. Yep. We do come back to Voyager. We get Neelix on the bridge for some reason, but he's checking sensors like a boss. Because
I'll tell you what, he is the perfect example of what we wanted for Tom Paris this entire time. This cross-trained,
way back,
right? This cross-trained person on Voyager. Like, he can cook.
Yeah.
He can be security. He can be an ambassador. He can do tactical.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, I know this, we're kind of like saying it in jest, but it's true.
It's absolutely true.
Right?
100%. Yeah. Kind of cool to see a Borg Klingon in charge. I do like Karak, and I wish we had more of him, but it's a nice thing to get into. And his sphere kind of looks like a Death Star when it's just moving along, and that big, the weapon powers up. I mean, it's kind of cool. Janeway, okay, so she wins. She gets away with it, I guess, but I still don't fully grasp the plan. But so what? Because you just have to give her a badass Janeway line like, I don't compromise with Borg.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if she doesn't compromise with Borg.
Except for all the times that she compromised with the Borg.
Right? if she didn't compromise with the Borg, then why not just let the Queen annihilate all of her own drones?
Yep. Yeah.
Right? I do have more on
me
this
too.
in discussion, so that's going to be a little bit more specific. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but a Borg sphere, Voyager, and a tactical armored cube walk into a bar because that's happening.
That it happened all over
in
the
this
place.
scene,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I remember one time there was a Borg cube and the entirety of Starfleet losing.
Oh, Wolf 359.
At one point in time. Yeah.
Never forget Wolf 359.
Right. Doctor says, thanks to the... I can't say that. Seriously. Thanks to the neural suppressant, I've been able to extract most of their Borg technology. The captain and B'Elanna are on the mend, but Tuvok will need a little more time to recover. So what can't the neural suppressant do?
Yeah, and don't suppress it too much, because then you're just jelly. Yeah.
I mean, it's as good as the Bassomatic. I swear.
It is.
Tuvok needing more time to recover. I'm wondering if we're going to see a follow-up on this because it feels like foreshadowing. A la Family after the best of both worlds.
That would be so interesting. Yeah.
Right? Because I haven't watched ahead. Also, how tricky was it to get the implant out of Janeway's brain? And how was her brain not physically damaged when that was literally shoved into her brain?
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, I guess the neural suppressant is also a hair growth formula too, because like 4 to 8 hours of recovery and everyone has full heads of hair.
Yeah. Well, yeah, except for the doctor. He still can't figure it out for himself.
Well, it's not a hollow suppressant.
No. And I will return to this later in the episode, but, we get the Seven and Axum moment, and I do like that followed up with this nice little exchange between Seven and Janeway at the very end. It's nice to see a bit of human connection there between these two at the end, because, let's face it, we have just had a lot of technobabble, virus-centric technobabble in this episode. We'll get right back to Unimatrix Zero Part II after a reminder about our giveaway with Factory Entertainment. And look, hands down, we are thrilled to bring you a giveaway that is pure Trek collector gold. We have teamed up with our friends at Factory Entertainment for your chance to win a piece that is equal parts art and Star Trek history.
You're so right, John. If you know Factory Entertainment, you know they don't mess around. These are the folks behind some of the most detailed, high-end licensed replicas in fandom, from James Bond to Batman to Game of Thrones and, of course, Star Trek.
And the grand star of this giveaway, the absolutely jaw-dropping Borg Queen Skull Signature Edition replica. It has been faithfully recreated from the surviving screen-used prop in the CBS archive and is one of the most accurate Star Trek collectibles we have ever seen.
It's crafted from heavyweight resin with an electroplated chrome finish. It's hand-weathered to match the damage seen in First Contact, and yes, it includes working light effects, including a fade-out sequence that mirrors the Queen's final shutdown in the film. This thing glows, literally and figuratively.
Nicely said. Now, that's the grand prize, but we've also got 2 runner-up prizes. Star Trek hand phaser bottle openers, one from the original series, one from Next Gen. They are solid, they are functional, and honestly, they're just plain fun.
And here's the best part. Entering is completely free, and when you follow the link in our show notes, you'll find multiple ways to enter and increase your chances of winning. The more you engage, the better your odds.
You couldn't stop yourself, could you?
I couldn't.
I love that. Well, look, this stuff, honestly, it is so cool. Norm, I know that every time I see Factory Entertainment at a convention, I go right to their booth because the quality of their props, their replicas, just completely blows me away. And, they've got heft. They feel like real-world objects.
Mm-hmm. I mean, collectibles, today, it's a statement piece, for wherever you place it. A piece of art in your house, in your den, wherever your geekdom resides. This is the kind of stuff that you want to collect.
So to enter, remember, just check out the show description for this episode, whether on your favorite podcast app, YouTube, or our website. The link is right there.
Or if you're seeing this on social, hit the link in our bio or description. It's as simple as that.
Don't miss your shot at owning the ultimate piece of Trek memorabilia. It's rare, it's screen accurate, and it could be yours. resistance
is absolutely futile.
Is tracking someone's brainwaves a subscription service with brain tags instead of air tags?
All right, yet another showdown between the Borg Queen and Janeway. And I think the Borg Queen, I mentioned in the last segment that I feel like there are untapped areas to explore with her. I think Susanna Thompson is great, but I also think that character is not given enough, seeing how much of her we have seen. Mm-hmm. There's more to explore here than just always being kind of the same character. But there were some things that jumped out at me between her interactions with Janeway here. First of all, making Janeway watch as she self-destructed these Borg vessels. And then, that's weird enough anyway, and we can get into the ethics of that and what Janeway's reaction could have been or should have been. But there was a line that she had, just 3 words that she says to Janeway, "You did this." And that honestly gave me chills. Those are the words of an abuser. Those are the words of somebody who is manipulating or trying to manipulate the other person to their very core. I thought that was such an interesting way to frame what was going on in that episode.
Is this in some way almost kind of like a bookend or, spiritually connected to Borg'd in Chain of Command as he's abusing Picard?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, same tactic, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it's framed the same way, the way that you're, the way that you're explaining it. I can see that, Borg'd saying, I'm not the bad guy.
Right, I'm not doing this. All you have to do is one thing, and you can change.
Remember, you got caught on our territory.
Yeah,
it's not that we were there on your territory and we got caught. So have a giant egg for meal.
and depressingly, this is also a political tactic that is used as well. No, I'm not doing this. You're making us do this because you won't comply.
Why are you making us hurt you? We don't want to hurt you, but you're making us hurt you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really heavy. It's really, really twisted, But let's talk about their interaction a bit because they're at cross purposes here. So the Borg Queen threatens to destroy everything. And at first, Janeway's like, okay, and that honestly makes sense to me. But I guess we have to ask, is Janeway right or wrong here in this moment? Because, of course, yes, we are all deeply concerned about the experience of Unimatrix Zero. But then I also think, well, should we be? Because this kind of goes back to the whole premise that we discussed in part 1. Does 7 actually have a point about them calling for help? Yeah, short answer, yes. Okay. But those people are in a virtual dream state. And how do we then have a judgment on how real that experience actually is? I guess thinking sort of pie in the sky, thinking sort of best intended purposes, well, you have to go, no, whatever it is, somebody is calling for help, we have to go there. We don't have to make a judgment about what version of help is more real than the other. This is an opportunity here. Although Janeway sees it as an opportunity to actually upend the entire structure of the Borg.
Yeah.
So is she more motivated by that than she is 7's plea, which is there are individuals and they're trying to get out? So that brings us back to that original question. What side should we be on here when Janeway is witnessing the Queen just, completely destructing tens of thousands of drones? Should she just stand there and watch it happen all day long until the Queen tires of it?
I mean, that's a great question. And we got to kind of think in 2 terms, because now we're straddling the Star Trek Next Generation type of tone and the Deep Space Nine type of tone. And we know how Picard would handle this, and we know how Sisko would handle this. Now, how's Janeway going to handle this? Because essentially, let's reframe this particular scene with the old adage, are you playing chicken with, this particular person? Is she playing chicken with the Borg Queen? Is this what Janeway's doing? Or is this what the Queen's doing with Janeway? So the Queen says, and this is after killing thousands, tens of thousands of drones in front of Janeway when she's captured.
Yeah.
The Borg Queen says, I know how this must upset you, Captain. As a Starfleet officer, you value all life, even drones. How many more are you willing to sacrifice? Thousands? Millions? You can put an end to this. I want you to go on a diplomatic mission. It's one of your primary functions, isn't it? Negotiations. Now, these are all well and good. And like you said, this is like the pattern of, say, the Gold Madred or the abuser that you're talking about, trying to get into Janeway's head, saying, like, stop making me hurt you by showing you what I can do that's forcing you to hurt me. But would this really work as leverage against Janeway? I mean, this is the Borg we're talking about, right?
Right.
You know, this goes all the way back to the way I said it in Unimatrix Zero Part I when I said I 100 billion% agree with what B'Elanna said. She says, it's not worth risking our lives for. There are only 150 people. I get it that this is Star Trek. I get it that this is the Starfleet way. I get it that there's a code of ethics involved. But what about the code of ethics of protecting and getting your crewmates home? What about that?
Right? Yeah.
So if Janeway, the way I would think that Janeway would respond to this was, okay, how far is the Queen willing to go before her bluff is called? How many thousands upon thousands upon thousands of drones is Janeway going to watch get destroyed and say, you're doing my job for me?
Right. Well, okay, there you go, because even as many times as Janeway or anybody from Starfleet have engaged a Borg cube, and as many times as somebody from Starfleet, including Janeway, have been successful in that, found a way to destroy or disable that cube, essentially they're fighting a computer program. All of those drones that they kill in the process, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, those drones are still just victims of the computer program. So it's hard to believe that she would be seriously taken aback by that because, again, the Borg Queen is just doing her job for her at that point. And she can keep wiping out cube after cube after cube. That paves their way home. You know,
right.
Except for the transwarp conduit, but that's another matter.
I mean, if the whole Borg collective, let's just take it as a 100% of the pie. If that collective is weakened because Janeway watched the Queen continue down this road and her bluff wasn't called, so saying, oh, there's, look, 100,000 on that ship. I'll blow that up. Are you willing now to negotiate, Janeway? Has this made a dent? In your resolve? Janeway's probably like, nope. Well, here's another one, and here's another one. So now you're racking up thousands upon thousands upon thousands of drones because Janeway chooses to sacrifice a fraction of those drones that are in Unimatrix Zero to watch the whole collective go down. So when is the Queen gonna blink? When basically it's like, okay, I can do the math. Remember, for every 1 million drones, there's one special genetically modified mutation of a drone that goes into Unimatrix Zero. So the numbers are against the Queen, right?
Yeah.
Again, if you have a ship that has 1 million drones, one of those drones, is a rebel drone.
Yep.
So who's really losing in this equation?
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I know. The logic doesn't really hold. I want to stay focused on the Queen for just a little bit because there's something else that I was kind of thinking of here. So I like this bit of the negotiation, the bit of the manipulation. The Borg Queen wants to send Janeway into Unimatrix Zero to force those drones to capitulate. And, negotiation, it's one of your strong suits, right? That's what you do. But the Queen at first won't go in, and Janeway chalks it up to the taste of individuality, being too tempting. But I honestly, and I mentioned this in the last episode, I think the Borg Queen already seems a bit individual. She refers to herself as I on many occasions. So there's something different. There's something unique about the Queen that is different from all the other drones, right? But at some point, and I wish we saw that change of heart or that change in tactic with the Queen. At some point, she decides to go into Unimatrix Zero. And I wish we got more out of that. I wish we got more out of the motivation to go in herself. And I wish that we had actually stayed. I kind of wish we had ended episode 1 with that and then follow into episode 2 with what happens when she gets there. Because I feel like we're missing this whole opportunity to figure out who the Borg Queen is, maybe even not see her in her dramatically assembled Borg suit. What does she, if 7 of 9 can look like Annika Hansen without the ocular implant, without all the other stuff, what does the Borg Queen look like the longer she spends in there?
Right.
Okay. And then there comes a really interesting choice or motivation or pressure on her to go back into the collective. Or maybe that's when the collective's got to create a new queen.
Right. That's a really good point. And I think it would have been really cool if they had crafted a way to see Susanna Thompson in her human form. So that, again, like, Annika...
or she's something. She's some alien humanoid.
Right.
But
seeing her, like, again, not as the Borg Queen. Because I think the one thing that we're missing here, and I'm probably going to steal a little bit from my later notes, we're missing an emotional connection with all of this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
On paper, it's a really interesting premise.
Yeah.
But in terms of the emotional stakes, if we don't believe that the motivations of our either heroes or villains are true, and if we don't feel that the gravitas or that threat level, especially coming from the Queen, like, I want the Queen standing there knowing that that one child can either be embraced or vaporized in a heartbeat. That's the kind of anxiety that type of character should make we as the audience feel every single time she's on screen. And I think the problem that we're running into with seeing more of the Borg, and I've mentioned this before in previous mission logs, when did we get overly sympathetic about the Borg? The Borg. Right? And the thing is, the more we become sympathetic towards any of their needs and we humanize those needs, the less they are. And you don't want the Borg to be less. You want the Borg to be consistently awesome in what they used to do. Right?
I agree with you to an extent. I mean, I think we can have sympathy with the individuals who are Borg, with the individuals who got assimilated, because we got just the tiniest little hint of that when the Queen says to that little boy in Unimatrix Zero that her parents are there. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. She's acknowledging a family that existed before they all got assimilated by the Borg. Like, this is fascinating stuff. And I think we can and should sympathize with that. But the big bad here is this relentless piece of technology that they have all handed themselves over to. We don't really know the origin of that big bad piece of technology. But at this point, it is just a self-perpetuating thing. That's the scary part of it.
Right. What I'm saying is that I think it's a great opportunity to take that, like, say, Seven's individual story and say, okay, how are we going to help this individual or a handful of individuals? But at the sake of demystifying the Borg itself. I think that's the big problem. Because because the weaker you create the central character's position, in this case, the Queen, the weaker the Borg overall become. Because it comes from the top down. Right. That's what I was talking about in the previous episode about the personification of evil. Like, if you create the villain, the structure of the villain, that villain has to give the heroes every challenge to overcome the villain. But if it's not a good enough challenge, then how good is the villain?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, like, again, going back to the Queen's like, well, I already have my problem that I can solve. I just need to blow up more drones. And you know what? I can assimilate more worlds and make more drones. And Janeway's like, then go ahead.
Yeah.
You are not, discouraging any of my decision making at all right now. Right?
Yeah.
The less Borg out there, the better, and probably the better our chances are of getting home and not running into other ships.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm just like, I get the whole moral dilemma of Janeway. You have to, I know you want to safeguard every precious life out there, including Borg drones. That's not consistent with how it's written.
Yeah.
Right? It's not consistent with how it's written. And that's the thing. if she wanted to save Borg lives, aside from just Sevens, she would have. But that's not consistent with where we are.
True that. Yeah. I also just want to take a moment here to express my virus frustration because you brought it up in the last segment that there's so much wiggle room here between what is a real virus versus what is a maybe we're just using the word virus like a computer virus potentially because it's something that happens in Unimatrix Zero, although there is the real world virus that protects those individuals who I guess they have the ability to go into the virtual world. Anyway, I tried to break it down for myself here. So you have the original Unimatrix Zero virus, and that means that the Borg Queen can't detect the people who can get into Unimatrix Zero. All right. So that's the original virus, is that they have this ability to go in there and they can't be detected. Then you have the Unimatrix Zero virus modified by Voyager, which is you get to retain your memories and start a civil war. Okay. Then sideline to this, the EMH's inoculation miracle.
Assimilation,
right?
inoculation.
Yeah, anti-assimilation inoculation. You can't get assimilated, not as quickly anyway. How do they know this would work? I don't know. But again, I just think it's a terrible plan. Then you have the Queen come back. No, I got my own virus, and it's just going to kill everybody who can get into Unimatrix Zero. That is a lot of biotech to be spread out over this one story. I mean, I'm sorry, but that is just too much.
It's a pretty blatant abuse of the original War of the Worlds premise, to destroy the Martians. Yeah. It's just
they only had to tech once,
right? And then we saw it in a bunch of things like V. We saw the
red dust,
virus, and then that was kind of co-opted in a very clever way with ID4, Independence Day. So with the computer virus. But then again, if we had to break down a physical reenaction of what we're trying to discuss, imagine the syringe being the tubules of B'Elanna's Borgness. And the solution or the virus being just basically a vaccine, like a vaccine solution. So that's pumped into her body.
Yeah. Right,
so that the tubules, like the syringe, can get poked into the membrane of the central plexus node so she can basically push that fluid into the node. How does that get transmitted to the rest of the network?
No idea.
Right?
Now, okay. Now, wait a minute. I am going to do a little bit of magic hand waving here, and I would love it if our listeners fought back or carried this forward and told me, no, here's the thing you can do. All right. If they had told us that this was a binary encoded bit of information in a physical virus, in a real world virus, maybe I would go along with that. But here's the thing. If you're going to do that, I think you got to limit yourself to one.
Yeah.
We can't just have virus after virus after virus.
You get a virus, and you get a virus, and you get a virus.
Yeah. Because this whole episode takes place on a molecular scale, and I'm no longer interested.
Yeah, I know. It's there's a lot, right? And there's a lot. Again, I know that some of the questions that we posed, in observations are a little bit cheeky, but at the same time, though, these are like flow charts. Like when we watch these episodes, we're watching them to the point where, okay, I have to make sense of this so that we can make sense of this discussion for our audience. So it's not that we're poking fun at it just to poke fun at it, but if you watched it the way we watched it, and if you had and sometimes I'll bring, a notebook. I'm like, okay, so this, then this, then this, then this. And then we watch it again, and we're like, nope, that was the order. You have this A, you have B, you have C, you have D. How do we resolve all of that? Because it's very difficult to make logical sense of the architecture behind that.
I had to do that more with this episode than I care to admit, because it's rare. It's very rare with an episode of Star Trek across the 576 previous episodes we've done that I actually need to sit down and rewind and go, wait, what?
Right.
What happens next? How did this lead to this next decision? And how did this motivate a character to do this other thing? This episode made me do that a lot.
I'm going to spin our conversation to something I thought was really interesting. And I took this note and I said, Chakotay's version of Best of Both Worlds Riker.
Yes.
because I love it when we get to see, our former crew get a little bit more time, on episodes, and especially season 6 and probably into season 7 where we don't see a lot of our ensemble cast anymore.
Yeah.
I love it when Chakotay is given a chance to prove his leadership skills. Now, I know this might sound controversial.
Okay.
But in my opinion, I think he handled his situation better than Riker did when Picard was assimilated into Locutus.
Oh, okay. I maybe.
So,
well, all right. I'm going to shut up. I'm going to shut up because because I think I agree with you. But yeah, go ahead.
So in this episode, Chakotay proved that he had every command instinct in complete control and was able to rise to the occasion, never doubting himself or his right to sit in the captain's chair. Chakotay, in that sense, was more like Commander Shelby than Riker without Shelby's cockiness.
Yeah.
So I just feel like I know that there was a story element involved with, Guinan trying to encourage Riker to take the captain's chair, and Riker, out of respect for Picard, who got turned into Locutus, like, it's not my job. It's his job.
Yeah.
And if I sit in that chair, that means he's not coming back. Well, Chakotay's like, we have a mission to complete. And if we don't complete this mission, then all of this is lost. And there's a scene that I'd like for you and I to perform because I think this is a fantastic scene. So I would like for you to perform Tom. I'll perform Chakotay.
Okay. It occurs to me that with you in command and Tuvok off the ship, that makes me acting first officer, technically speaking.
What's your point?
Well, it's my duty to give you an opinion. And in my opinion, I think we should pull them out now before it's too late.
I appreciate your diligence, but I've made my decision. We wait.
How long? A day? A week?
As long as it takes to complete the mission.
This mission isn't worth their lives.
You've made your point.
Apparently not.
Lieutenant, a first officer could get a lot of trouble for talking to his captain that way.
Well, I've learned from the best.
Now, this conversation could have gone the way of Scorpion, the way that Janeway and Chakotay went at each other. But I loved the energy that Chakotay had in this with Tom. Tom's right, but Chakotay also has to make the command decision, and he doesn't shut him out. He doesn't say, it's the Chakotay or the highway. I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
But we have a job. And I understand. Like, I can hear Tom saying, like, B'Elanna's over there. Tuvok's over there. Our captain's over there. And Chakotay's like, I know this. I know this.
100% that's the subtext.
Right?
Yeah.
But you also have to let it play out. And this is that Maquis in him. He's like, I've seen these campaigns go sideways, but they also get reversed so that there's possible success, but we have to let it play out. We can't let our emotions get involved. So I think that's just really cool seeing that, in comparison to all the way back in Caretaker where, Tom saves Chakotay from the staircase, or when Chakotay is, busting Tom for credits, that he's swindling in Sandrines, like things like that.
Right.
We don't get enough of that. And I think that this is a really nice way to remind everyone, like, hey, look, these characters have come from somewhere, and they have grown.
The top reason Norman and John are better than the Borg, the only thing they insert in your brain is this show.
Well, all of the viruses have been uploaded or downloaded. Really depends on how far I want to push my glasses up my nose. But we are at the end of Unimatrix Zero Part II. Technically, not really Part 2 because it was just Unimatrix Zero entirely, but for all intents and purposes, the very first episode of Season 7. But we, and as we do here on Mission Log, we do our due diligence. We watch the episode several times, and then we see, after we've gone through all of our observations and all of our discussions, does this episode hold up? Does it withstand the test of time? And finally, did we find any morals, meanings, or messages to mine from this episode? So we have had a lot to discuss, and probably some points that we were a little even more surprised at ourselves of being able to kind of suss out in our discussion. But where did you land, John? Like, where are we now with, does this episode hold up for you?
So I need to take you back, honestly, to right around the time that I did my first rewatch of Voyager. And this is a while ago. This is probably like 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. I was really intentional about watching all of it on DVD. And I remember really liking this two-parter. I didn't remember a lot of the details. I just remembered, okay, I like the idea of this virtual dream state. I like the idea of Seven having to go in there and kind of navigate what's happening for her personally, but also tactically, what will happen to these people. Then we roll around to mission log. And on mission log, we have to go through this more with a fine-toothed comb and pick it apart, not just for the morals, meaning, messages, but everything else about the episode, the performances, the production value, the story logic, and how the whole thing winds up. And let me start with something positive, because my first note to myself was, we'll always have Unimatrix Zero. And I think that there is this element, it really is, it's Rick and Ilsa at the end, standing there.
Well, this is our hill and these are our beams.
Right. And honestly, I think the romantic story here works, because we're able to tell, if you go back through these two episodes and you just pull the Seven and Axum scenes, okay, you're talking about a total airtime of maybe like 10, 12 minutes.
If that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not much. But they effectively told this tragic romantic story in that short amount of time. And it's something that informs who Seven of Nine is and what else is going on in her backstory and who she potentially is in the future. That's all really valuable stuff. That's the human connection that we want out of a good science fiction story, right? I give them props for that. But I also feel like there are a lot of missed opportunities with this dual episode here, with this two-parter. And it might be a little unfair, because I think one of the more intriguing possibilities that has gone unexplored in this is partly due to where we are now with our understanding and our relationship with technology. This episode came out in 2000, not 2025. And our idea now of what virtual worlds are and what alternate identities can be in a virtual world, they are so much more complex and nuanced now than they were back then. So that premise in 2000 might have been mind-blowing. But I feel like now that story just gets completely muddy, and it relies only on our actors emoting without clearly conveying the story. And that's really too bad. We name-checked The Matrix last time and saying, okay, here's an episode of Star Trek that comes out just a few years after The Matrix. So it's like there's something in the zeitgeist, there's something in the cultural conversation about virtual worlds and who are you when you're in the virtual world. This tries, but it doesn't really get there. So the more I studied it, the more of a mess the episode became. Again, on the surface, a Borg dream state, interesting idea. And more than that, the whole question of what is a quote-unquote real identity, either the Borg drone or the individual in a virtual world, that is fascinating. But we never really go deep into that. What we do instead is we have all these convoluted tactical decisions. The Unimatrix Zero drones have a nanovirus, so does a Voyager crew, along with the assimilation inhibitor. And then so does a Borg Queen. She's got her own virus to wipe out the Unimatrix Zero drones. And it just becomes tedious. And I found myself, like I said, jumping over to other resources like Memory Alpha and Wikipedia just to keep it straight.
Can I interrupt you for a second there?
Yeah, please, yeah.
In saying that, do you feel that these two episodes are probably the most techno-babbly episodes that we've encountered so far?
Well, in a way, yes, because usually technobabble comes in at the crisis point. It's the save the cat moment, right? And if you don't know what the save the cat moment is, look at it. It's a screenwriting term. You get to a point in the middle of the story where you have to make a decision. You have to do the thing, right? So we get to a point, okay, we have to take action. Now, if we need to come along with a hand-waving technobabble explanation for how we do it, yeah, okay, fine. And look, if Voyager in particular, but Star Trek in general, if it can take the criticism for getting lost in technobabble, fine. But it's not just about plasma conduits. Now it's about viri and assimilations and virtual worlds, interesting in their own right, but at the expense of getting back to the human story. And that's really the big problem here. These two episodes, they frustrate me because, like I said, I remember liking it when I first saw it. But here, now, in this show, we're asking if it holds up. In the sense that it is produced and acted well, sure, because they all are at this point. And there are a few great moments of direction in this episode, too. But in the sense that it adheres to any internal logic or tells a compelling story to really make me think, no. I'm sorry to say. So look, there you have it. I mean, that's me over a course of time, being able to appreciate it in one way, but then not appreciate it in another way. That's where I am now. And maybe you out there in the audience, maybe you had a similar experience. Maybe you had the opposite experience. I would be interested in hearing from you. What about you, Norman? I'm interested in hearing from you now.
Well, we're actually very much on the same page in a lot of this. And I think it comes from something you just said. You just said, but at the expense of getting back to the human story. And that is very paramount to how I felt about this episode. There was someone I was having a discussion with on our Discord, and basically my reaction was, if I'm not invested in the emotional storyline of our characters, then I feel like I'm not watching the show, or the show isn't giving me something that I need to watch it. So as the kids say, TLDR, there are no believable stakes that sell this narrative.
Yeah.
So it's hard to invest myself in the drama of this entire story. Now that's the short version.
Okay.
But if you really want to know,
lay it on
my
me.
full reasoning. Right?
Yeah.
So does this episode hold up? This time, one of the only reasons that I'm saying yes is because it is the conclusion of a 2-part episode.
Okay.
So as a single story arc, this episode, Unimatrix Zero Part II, it holds up to complete the narrative, but it is probably the only reason, or one of the only reasons, why this holds up for me. My biggest problem with this episode, and this is very much similar to what you're saying here, or the entirety of Unimatrix Zero as a whole, I never really felt once like there was something at stake, something really at stake. Okay? When dealing with the Borg, traditionally, there's some kind of price to pay against the Borg.
Yeah.
And we saw that and continue to this day in modern Star Trek to see that in Captain Picard, plagued by what his one assimilation did to him when he was turned into Locutus. They made an entire feature film about that with First Contact, and they have touched on that in future series in Picard, right? But it kept torturing him. You know, his storyline is laced with reminders of how much of his humanity has been stripped away from him, and how much it still costs him to reclaim his former life before assimilation. So it proves to us, at least in his character, that assimilation is akin to some level of personal hell. Right? And that is what is completely lost in the assimilation of the 3 characters of this story.
Yeah.
Right? For all intents and purposes, okay, and forgive me for this tangent, and with the most Deus Ex Machina element I have ever seen, either in the history of Voyager or in Star Trek, the Doctor's Borg neural suppressant. I mean, you want to talk about hand waving? That is arm waving. That is body waving. That is body surfing. right?
Well, it's sort of like how in Star Trek, time travel used to be this dangerous thing that you might accidentally dumb luck your way into doing, and then you better get out of it as soon as you can. Then it just became like every other week. Like, oh yeah, we travel back in time all the time. We know how that works. We just we hit the time travel button, boom.
Slingshot around that sun, right?
Yeah. And now it's the same thing with the Borg. It's like the Borg are the most horrible, dangerous beings we've ever encountered. Yeah, but we can pop in for a few hours and back out. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like, we've been kind of building to that. So the neural suppressant, all right, it's never ever been mentioned before. I get that. That's what you're talking about. It gets to the point where, you're going to save the cat. You got to come up with a solution. I get that. But Janeway's and B'Elanna's and Tuvok's assimilation, it really didn't feel worse than any standard cosmetic change you'd see on a Star Trek episode. Like when Kirk was, surgically altered to look like a Romulan to steal the cloaking device in the Enterprise Citizen. Or even more so, like more modern, Sisko and O'Brien and Odo surgically altered to look like Klingons, in Apocalypse Rising, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like more like, ooh, that's a fun caper kind of thing that's happening, as opposed to, oh my God, they have been assimilated by the Borg. So you take everything you've learned about Borg assimilation through Picard from now until then, and we should be able to apply that to what's happening to Janeway, B'Elanna, and Tuvok, and we don't get that. Yeah. I'm not saying that we're going to get it later. I'm not saying if we're going to get like a family, kind of resolution to that. Because the fight between Picard and Robert, when he says, he was broken. Picard was broken. Mm-hmm. Right? Do we see that? Are we going to see that? That may pay off. I don't know. I really don't know. But without the physical violation, without the suffering, without the exacting process that we saw in what assimilation actually does, then it demystifies and it takes away the power of the Borg being this unstoppable evil. It's like we just choose to do it. We choose to put this thing in our brain so we can go onto their ship, get assimilated, do our thing, go out, get re-unassimilated, and grow our hair back in 48 hours, and we're fine. Right? That's not how this is supposed to work.
Yeah.
Right? So going back to, well, Norm, did you like anything about this episode? Yeah, I thought this, again, like you said, I thought the production was solid. The special effects, the battle sequences, the set designs, I thought the central Plexus set was really good. Yeah. All of the cosmetic elements from a production standpoint, sure. Mm-hmm. You can see time, money, effort, right? Nobody wants to put on a bad production. All of that is there. Mm-hmm. Even the performances are good.
Yeah.
But the thing is like you said before, that we come to know that about, Voyager. We've come to know that about Star Trek. Yeah. Does that make it an episode that stands up? Well, sure. Right. But the real reason why this episode doesn't hold up for me is because I just wasn't emotionally invested in what our characters were doing. There is nothing in this episode that drives the character arcs forward. Right. And we don't feel the aftermath of what they achieved. Assimilation used to break the best that Starfleet had to offer. Picard, right? And the scars were and are deep and long-lasting, and I felt none of that at the end of this episode, and that's what bothers me.
It's almost like they were thinking ahead to the action figure. We have Janeway in her command uniform. We have Tuvok in his command uniform, and B'Elanna in hers. And now we can do the variant where they're all assimilated by the Borg.
Well, I can. So, like I said in the previous episode, I said, I feel like the way that this came up in the writers' room, a couple of people said, what would be really cool if Janeway were a Borg. Mm-hmm. And I love the Matrix too. Let's write a two-parter around that. Yeah. But that's not how you're supposed to do it.
And best of both worlds. Remember that? Yeah. Okay. We'll do that. That'll be our cliffhanger.
So that's why you and I are seeing certain things that don't logically fall into place because they weren't earned to begin with.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly. For me, I think I'm kind of light on morals, meanings, messages. Last time around, I talked about the idea of what Janeway was championing, which is the revolutionary spirit. And I forgot her exact term for it, but it was one of those they dismiss like, oh, Civil War is such a nasty phrase. I prefer to think of it as a
revolution.
Yeah, a revolution. Yeah,
a resistance.
A resistance. That's the word. Yeah, that sounds so much better. And there is that theme still here, of course. And I think if you want to put a face on it, Karak piloting that sphere is great. Love that guy. Love that guy to no end. I also think there's kind of we don't spend quite enough time there, but again, I think the romantic story here works pretty well, and there is something about love being a motivating factor that transcends the hell that these drones are in, that they have a place that they can connect emotionally, and Seven felt that too, and there is obviously the tragedy of her and Axum really not ever being able to be reunited in person, but it's partly based on their relationship that they even got to do the things and accomplish what they did in Unimatrix Zero. There's something really lovely about that. And then, for Janeway, always call the Borg Queen's bluff. Because you know what? You could have just stayed there all day long, and you would have had no more Borg to deal with ever again. Well, what else you got, Norman?
I'm on that same page with you, where the moral meaning or message that I found was resistance isn't futile. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to soapbox a little bit, so I'm going to read from the script.
Sure, yeah.
The moral meaning or message did crystallize for me in a certain way. Unimatrix Zero, for those who have the genetic mutation, represents true freedom and a place where you can be who you are supposed to be. And as an analog for our real world, this is why we watch Star Trek, right? That is a state or a country or a belief system that is more important than we can ever know, and it demands everything that is required for its protection and for its evolution. This place where you can be who you are supposed to be. Like the drones in Unimatrix Zero, their bodies and minds that are conscious in the real world only serve a collective of totalitarian beliefs. Even if deep down in their own true subconsciousness, they don't believe themselves. That is why the representation of Unimatrix Zero is of paramount importance as a concept in this episode. In that protected and safe space, those who are doomed to serve in the real world totalitarian regime because they have no choice due to forced assimilation, understand that their individual and personal freedoms that are protected in that safe space in Unimatrix Zero are worth fighting for, and if required, making the ultimate sacrifice. And there is no greater cause than the fight for freedom and to protect those freedoms, even if great sacrifices have to be made at the sake of possible expulsion from paradise in one way or another. Wherever there are those who are oppressed by a totalitarian regime, there will always be the need for a resistance against that regime, whether labeled freedom fighter or rebel or Maquis. To paraphrase Captain Kirk at the end of Mirror, Mirror, in every revolution, there's one person with a vision. Are you that person? Is there an Axum or an Annika that you aspire to be? What can one voice do, you may ask? Well, perhaps alone? Nothing. But in concert with a choir of voices, you can achieve something unimaginable. But it all starts with your choice to defend and protect not just your freedom, but everyone's freedoms. And to quote Sean Connery's Malone from 1987's The Untouchables, what are you prepared to do? Oh, and just to steal a line from you, John,
yeah,
I'm just talking about Star Trek.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Imperfection.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Chris Garris, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takachi. Ask your holographic doctor if anti-assimilation inoculation is right for you. Side effects include dizziness, nausea, vomiting, good old rocket lag, shortness of breath. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.